Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Pickles and Vodka podcast. I'm not going to do much of an intro today because I want to jump right into my interview with my guest. As you guys know, I've been traveling across the country the last week, and on my way through Washington, I stopped in my guest's hometown and we were able to record this episode, which I'm super excited to share. So without further ado, here is our conversation. Hi, welcome to my podcast.
Hello.
This is still so surreal to me.
Yeah.
First of all, this is Madison.
Yes, it is.
I think we should talk about how we met before we jump into this because it's like a crazy story. How long ago was it?
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out because was it Flickr first?
It was Flickr.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to get the timeline also in my head because Flickr, I mean, I probably was 14.
Yeah.
I want to say 14,
how old are you
15?
now, by the way?
I'm 25.
Okay, I'm 26. So, yeah, 15, I want to say, was when I started being really active on Flickr and posting really angsty stuff. And
yes.
For those who don't know, Flickr is a photo sharing website, and a lot of us back then used it as like a photo journal.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever do the 365 challenge?
Yes. Yeah, so that was a huge part of it, was seeing other people doing photo everyday challenges, but then also, photo journaling essentially, and being like, I have a place where I can do this? Great, I will jump in on that. And it was a lot before a lot of social media really even existed in the way that it does now. I mean, there of course wasn't Instagram, so there wasn't that culture of people kind of saying everything on their mind all the time and then also posting photos.
But especially for me, I was super isolated and nerdy, and I didn't really have friends, and so I didn't really have any hobbies before, like photography, and so I loved just being able to share stuff on there and being honest and seeing that I wasn't alone. Yeah. So I met Madison on there. We both posted the same type of stuff, and I think we messaged each other at one point.
Yeah. I wish I could find that stuff. I actually get emails randomly from Flickr sometimes, and I'm like, how do I still have my email? I don't have my login. I think they just sent
out a message where they're getting rid of all the old content unless you pay.
Well, goodbye.
And they gave me 2 months in advance to save all my stuff, and I was like, I don't know.
I'm good. It's 10 years. I don't really think I need to have that now.
So we've known each other forever, but we friended each other on Facebook a little while ago. Yeah. And we've been keeping up with each other over the years. Yeah. And you've been on a crazy, insane journey.
Yes.
So why don't we talk about that? Where do you want to start?
Where do I want to start? Yeah. Oh boy. I don't even know.
How would you describe your history with mental health, first of all?
Yeah. Woo. Fun. So, I mean, I think as a kid, I was also pretty isolated. My parents were very nice, but very detached. So, a lot of looking back into my childhood, it's there's not a lot happening, I feel that I can point to and be like, oh, that was not great or that was great. It just kind of was there, and things were just kind of happening or not, and just kind of playing catch up a lot. So, for me, I always kind of felt like something was going to happen, or I didn't really know what was going on, and kind of catching up with that all the time, not really having the most communicative family unit. And I have one older sister, and we've always been really close, but we also have been very close, but also never really talked about anything. We've just started doing that in the way. That's
usually how it works later in life.
Yeah, super interesting. So there was kind of a lot of that, of just kind of living in the same space and not really acknowledging the same things. And so I was really anxious and overwhelmed from a really young age. Didn't really know where to put that or how to deal with that or how to communicate about that, and was lovingly dismissed by most kind of older people in my life.
Lovingly dismissed.
In the way that's everyone has troubles, one of those things. No one was saying suck it up, kid, or something.
And how old were you?
I want to say probably second and third grade was it young was when I first started feeling this seems a little bit more than what my peers are experiencing, but then also being very self-aware as a second and third grader and thinking well, maybe this is what everyone is experiencing, and we're all just not talking about it. Yeah. And to a certain extent, of course, there's a large majority of people who are experiencing similar things, but I probably about fourth grade, it kind of really was this is unbearable, and I was just kind of always having meltdowns and like just not being able to like regulate and deal with my life and being very overwhelmed kind of.
What would a meltdown look like for you?
Just kind of like all of my emotions spilling over. I never was very mad as a kid, so it was more just like sad and upset and frustrated, and just like lots of crying, lots of that. But definitely like only when I got home, or like only when like I could go to the bathroom and like hide or something. So it was very much like in isolation and very much like no, like I knew somehow like don't do this around people, like that's bad, which isn't true.
So
but
no one really knew you were going through this, even your parents and your sister? Like you just hid it from them?
Yeah, it just seemed like that was what you should do, you know? You just kind of like do your life, you cope however you do in private, so that when you're in public you're like good and polite and, you know, people like you or whatever.
So I think we both know that never ends well.
No.
So when did like everything kind of explode for you?
I think probably 7th grade was kind of the real like head of the climax of the mountain. I don't know the metaphors I'm trying to use. It was really kind of the moment where it was really unbearable, and I started having suicidal thoughts in like 5th grade. Very like passively. I wasn't making attempts, but I wrote about it a lot, thought about it a lot, and realizing more and more like, oh yeah, I guess like 10-year-olds aren't all doing that. Like that's not necessarily like healthy. It's not bad, of course, to have suicidal thoughts like as like a concept, but
would you explain like the concept of suicidal ideation to someone who might not really, because I know suicide is a very taboo topic, and most people, when you mention suicide, they instantly go into like protection mode, like we need to get you to a safe place, but for many of us it's just something we think about every day.
And I think that is really hard. I mean, I've even had doctors who haven't understood that, and I've had very non-ideal situations that have come out of things like that. As someone who has experienced thoughts since I was really young and how it has been kind of normal, I feel like the main thing to like distinguish is if it is like passive or active. Like having suicidal thoughts just on their own, like it's a thought, it's distressing, it's not a positive thought, of course, but if the thought is leading you towards action, that's a whole separate thing. So if you're just having thoughts, just like anything that could be completely benign, you can deal with that, cope with that, do what you will with that to make that more healthy. But if you have plans, if you're going towards those plans, like that's when it's like, okay, we need to like get some things in play. And that is really complicated, I think, for people to understand and figure out if someone's talking about it. So it's tricky.
So as a 10-year-old, would you say you were experiencing the passive thoughts?
Yeah.
But still, how do you explain that to your parents?
Yeah, exactly. And I just didn't.
So what happened?
I mean, I just internalized everything a lot. Started engaging in self-injurious behaviors also around that time, which I think makes a lot of sense because I was internalizing everything.
It's a natural progression.
Yeah, again, like these things that I'm like, well, that makes sense. So that kind of also happened around that time. Lots more kind of like repetitive behaviors and things where I was just trying to like make sense of how much turmoil I felt like I had and how I had no way to communicate it. And when I did, if I did kind of get up the courage, again, it was kind of like lovingly dismissed. Like, you know, I was talking to so-and-so's mom and she's having a hard time too. And just being like, okay, well, great.
I hate that.
Yeah, and it was like well-intentioned. Like I
course.
very much feel like my parents both were not very emotionally equipped in that sense when we were younger, to kind of like help us along those things. Like that was what they knew best to do, was just like make you feel not alone, but instead it felt very dismissive. So I even like in 5th grade like went to the school counselor on my own accord and was like, I need to talk to you. Like little 10-year-old me was like, something is wrong.
That's cool that you just did that on your own.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of adults that can do that, let alone 10-year-olds.
Yeah, I definitely was wanting help in some way and kept kind of running into like not having that really at home. So that was certainly like a thing that existed.
So after that, how did things progress?
Yeah, so 6th, 7th, it just kind of kept kind of getting worse. But then you add in middle school, which I think no one really has good middle school experiences.
No.
Everyone is mean and kind of awful. And I went to a small school where you pretty much knew everyone. Our middle school was 6th, 7th, and 8th. So there wasn't a lot of ability to kind of like hide or go under the radar. Like you pretty much were going to be seen, and if you were going to be targeted, you were going to be targeted. So I was targeted, not in a terrible extreme ways, but in just like kind of malicious girl drama kind of ways as a person who just like wanted to just do school and like
yeah, imagine that, going to school and wanting to just do school.
Yeah, I very much was that kid that was like, I just want to try hard, and people were like, I don't know, apparently that made me terrible or something. I'm not exactly sure what their motivation was. So I had a few people that kind of like turned on me in 12-year-old girl ways that were just very hurtful and felt very, very awful. So what I already had kind of coming into those grades, all of the kind of turmoil I already was holding on to, it just kind of kept getting more and more exacerbated by the environment that I was in, where I like didn't really feel safe, didn't really feel good. I had like one friend pretty much, and then for the most part everyone else, not like everyone was coming after me, but the rest of it wasn't very positive. So it kind of was like, yeah, I'm really done with this. There's nothing good about being here. I still had lots of suicidal thoughts, wasn't having any plans or anything at that point still, but more and more was just like, I don't think there's a reason why I'm like supposed to be doing this. Like, this is just awful.
And were you getting treatment at the time?
No.
Like, or counseling or anything?
Mm-mm.
No.
Yeah, so I went to that school counselor in 5th grade for like 2 seconds, basically right before I was moving on to middle school. And she gave me this beautiful journal and, wished me well, and that was kind of it. And then that was kind of it. Like, yeah. It just was like, okay, well.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I guess I'm just gonna figure this out. And I think probably 7th grade, 8th grade was kind of when the internet did start coming into play as well. So I first like found this dance forum. I grew up dancing. So I found this dance forum that I connected with all these people and started to feel not alone for the first time in my life, because there's people that cared about me in very intentional ways, but also were experiencing similar things. So I didn't just feel like I was just weird and dramatic and like, I can't figure this out. I always just felt like it was my fault. Like, I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm doing something wrong. I don't have the right formula to not be a mess.
I can't even imagine having, mental illnesses before the internet was a thing.
It's super interesting because I think a lot culture now is very much like, oh, social media is so negative and everyone's comparing, and of course it can be very negative.
Yeah.
But the ways that I've always experienced it, I was like, it's like the most liberating place where I was like, oh, there's other people in the world who like are also hurt and are willing to talk about that and are willing to sort through that and are doing work to be better. And so like kind of understanding like, oh, I could go to therapy, or oh, I could like get help was like a new thing. Like, it just wasn't ever.
For sure.
I didn't know that was really real.
So you discovered these communities, and did it make things, obviously it made things better.
Yeah, it helped me make sense of a lot of things kind of initially, and I think I kind of rode that wave of like, wow, I'm not alone, for probably like a year. A lot of my symptoms kind of felt a lot better because I really did feel like I wasn't just this isolated person who just, was just bad at being a human. And there was, a little buffer of probably about a year where I was like, wow, I feel a lot better. And then that kind of wore off slowly but surely, where everything that still was existing still existed, and I wasn't just like living this like little euphoria of internet love and affection. It was like, well, that's certainly nice, but
yeah, that's the thing about these online communities, is that it's like the blind leading the blind in a lot of ways. It's great to not feel alone, but you can only do so much.
Yeah.
Like, I can talk to someone on the other side of the world and offer my love and support, but when it comes down to it, I'm not equipped to handle their issues like a licensed counselor could.
Yeah, and I think that definitely, like, I was on a forum that was like all around like self-injury support, and that was like the thing that everyone constantly were really, really adamant about. We are only going to be encouraging people to get outside help. Like, we're here for each other, but like, we're not therapists, we're not counselors, we're not qualified, credentialed people, and peer support is really great, but also like, you need to go get help. So I had people for like months and months, basically, anytime I would post or say anything, they were like, are you in therapy? I'll be like, no, what, like, leave me alone, what are you talking about?
See,
like,
all the places like that I found were like triggering.
Yeah.
See, I feel like not to distract from your story, but there are a lot of communities out there that can just kind of suck you deeper into the hole.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you found that kind of community. So did you get therapy eventually?
Yeah, so I think that was probably around my sophomore year where I like wrote a letter to my mom. So a lot of things happened in our family, and I was living with my mom and my sister at this point, and I wrote a letter to her basically being like, I just feel stressed with school, because like I didn't know what to say. And again, always like being lovingly dismissed by her, I was like, I don't know what's going to like seem legitimate to her or seem like I didn't think she was gonna say like no straight out, but I also wanted to make it, I didn't want to be like, hey, I've been self-injuring for 5 years and you didn't know. I couldn't figure out what was like the middle ground of like something that was good but not too good but not too bad. Yeah, exactly, kind of easing into it. So I wrote her a letter and was like, I'm stressed out with school and my friends or something like that, and she had some knowledge of me like having difficulty, but I don't really know what her perception of that was. So she did say yes, and I ended up going to a counselor and started seeing someone. I think it was about my sophomore year, probably like my end of my sophomore year.
What was that counselor like?
Interesting. I actually ended up seeing him on and off for quite a long time. I actually just stopped earlier in this year.
Oh, wow.
Like for like the 8th time, like because I moved away and I've come back, so there's been all sorts of things kind of in between.
Yeah.
But it was my first experience, so I had nothing to really compare it to. So, I mean, I'd spent a whole lifetime, 15 years, like not talking about stuff and being really good at being covert, and then was like, yeah, therapy, okay, and then went into therapy and was like, what? I like legitimately don't know how to do this. I really don't. And so at first it was a lot of me just like, if I was talking about music or like photography, like things I was into, like hobbies. Yeah. And then that was kind of it. And then me leaving and being like, is this therapy? Like, what am I supposed to feel better? Or like, what's going on? And
I mean, talking about those things is great.
It is valuable. I definitely...
At some point you gotta get deep.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always fun.
Yeah, we felt, I think both of us, I mean, him as a therapist and me as a client, I think both kind of fell into a trap of it being a little too just like casual small talk all the time. And
oh my god, I just got out of seeing a therapist like that.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because I would have all sorts of weird guilt about not being like, oh, it's my fault, like I'm not bringing it up, but then I'd be like, well, he's not asking, and then it would just like be back and forth, like this circle.
It's literally his job to like guide the conversation.
Yeah. And it was, again, like being young, 15, 16, it's like, I don't
know how to do that.
I don't know how to do that. I barely know how to do that now, let alone as, 15-year-old who basically hasn't spoken to people their whole life.
So did this go on through high school graduation?
Yeah, so I saw him through graduating high school, my senior year. So I did graduate early, and that September, I was in the hospital for like a couple days, which I kind of alluded to before with people not understanding like suicidal ideation versus it being like an active threat. So I had went to someone to talk about medication. I had been seeing that therapist for around like 3 years at that point, and was pretty much doing the same, but had a place to talk about music every week. But was mentally was pretty much doing the same. So he wasn't like anti-medication, but he certainly wasn't like it's the first response, which is also how I personally align. So at that point it was like, okay, well, it's been actual years. We probably could have explored this earlier if you wanted to, but if you want to explore it, like maybe that's worthwhile. So he got me an appointment with a nurse practitioner, and I went in and talked to her and like filled out all of the scales of suicidal stuff. Paperwork, really fun paperwork. And apparently something I put on that paperwork like tipped me over into the like it's an emergency.
Like it was a red flag.
Yeah, which I didn't feel unsafe. I mean, I had a lot of suicidal thoughts again, like that wasn't unfamiliar to me, but I wasn't like, I didn't have plans. I wasn't like trying to act out on it. I wasn't thinking I was going to in a month or something. Like there was nothing in,
You were just trying to be honest.
I was just trying to be honest, exactly. But yeah, something tipped it off. And she was really sweet, but basically like she came in and was talking about the paperwork with me, and then was like, I'm really sorry. Like she actually apologized. She's like, I'm really sorry, but with what you've told me, like I'm going to have to ask you to go to the hospital, or I'll have to get a police escort to take you.
What?
And I was like, what? And I just turned 18, so I'm thinking, oh crap, like I'm gonna be in an adult ward. I'm gonna be in there forever. Like, I'm just like, oh no, like everything is bad. And earlier that year, because that was September, that February, I had gone to the ER feeling very unsafe and had a really bad experience. Wasn't admitted. But I had a really bad experience.
Was this suicidal thoughts again? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And definitely was not feeling like it was just passive. Was feeling more like I wasn't actually acting on it, but felt like I was very close to it. So I had went, because that's what I heard you do. So I already had that experience earlier that year, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna go back and it's gonna be awful. And so I told her, like, here's the deal. Like, I'm gonna comply. That's the best thing to do. But also, like, I had such a bad experience, and I don't want to, like, there's only one psychiatric hospital in, like, my city, so it's like, you can't go to some other place and be like, that place will be better. It's like, there's one hospital that has a psychiatric ward. So my mom actually had to take me to this appointment anyway, so my mom and I drove. They had called ahead, and so I, like, the head of the psych triage, like, talked to me, who was, like, really nice, and made it as smooth as possible. But I definitely was just thinking, like, I have to comply. Like, I can't really get out of it, and I can't say, like, no, you don't understand, or, like, make some big thing out of it.
So even though you were 18, you couldn't do anything about it? Like, she was gonna, like, call the cops if you refused?
Yeah.
That's so fucked up.
Yeah. So it was definitely, like, feeling like I'm very trapped now. Like, I have no choice. And again, feeling like, well, it's gonna be better if it's voluntary. It's not going to be good if I cause a ruckus or, like, fight them on it. Not physically, but that would also be very bad.
Think of the street cred you get on the psych ward.
I fought the psych triage. Yeah, no, I wanted to avoid that. So it was very nice and, like, probably the most polite I've ever been in my life in a situation that I did not want to be polite in. And so, yeah, I was admitted, and it was a Friday, like, mid-afternoon evening, so the psychiatrist was out all weekend, so I basically just sat around Friday, Saturday, Sunday, waiting for him to show up on Monday. Talked to him Monday for, you know, like 10 minutes, maybe. He asked me what I would like to be started on, if I wanted to start medication, because that was the whole point.
Gonna get something out of this deal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so he actually asked me, like, is there something you would like to try? Which I was like, that's an interesting thing. Like, would you ask someone that normally? Like, in other medical situations?
Not really.
Probably not. Like, which heart medication do you want? Which ones do your friends take? Like, which one is your favorite? Like, I don't know. And so I heard about one medication that one of my friends had taken, and I was like, that one. And he's like, okay. Like, it legitimately was that simple, which unfortunately, like, there is kind of a degree of that. If you are doing medication, there's a lot of trial and error. They're not probably
it's a guessing game.
Yeah, no one's gonna say, like, this is the one that I know is for you. So that's kind of where he was coming from with that. But it felt a little weird that he was so maybe open about that he didn't really know. So I, like, left basically the end of that day. So I was basically just there, just waiting for him to show up. Basically.
I hate that.
Yeah.
So that was the September after you graduated?
Yeah.
Where was there to go after that?
I didn't know what I was really doing. I was working full time. I started working when I was 16. I was in college classes also. So I was full time in college classes when I was a junior in high school. So when I was 15.
Yeah, I'm overachiever alert.
It's really common here. It's like a program that you can either dual enroll or you can just full on enroll in the community colleges.
That's really cool. So you're just taking like core classes and stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you can get your 2-year like general ed stuff done if you do it right, so to speak.
Nice.
Which I didn't. I was very close, but I didn't quite get it all done. But it allowed me to work, so I was working part-time, and then since I graduated early, then I just kind of switched over to full-time. So at that point, I was working full-time and didn't really know what I was doing. So after I got out of the hospital, I had this weird thing where everyone thought I was better, and everyone thought all my problems were gone.
Well, because you had a magic pill.
Because I had a magic pill, and I had this magical experience where I was like, in the hospital, which that makes everyone better.
Yeah.
You go to the hospital, you come out, you're better.
Obviously.
So it was very weird because I was not better at all, and I had, I think, maybe even more suicidal thoughts than when I went in, but I feel like I could slide under the radar, and it was very unhealthy. So I spent a few months just being uber unhealthy and kind of reveling in the fact that I was kind of invisible. Like, everyone just was like, oh, yay, like, you're great now, and being like, yeah, I am, and just, like, full self-destructing.
My inpatient experience was identical.
Yeah.
It's especially if you go in when you're really young. I think people kind of have the mindset that it's just a phase, and they don't realize that this might be something chronic.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, very much. It was very weird. And I mean, my work was so supportive and lovely to me. It's like a local small business that actually friends of mine own now. But I mean, like my coworkers I all knew really well, and they like, gave me cards, and they were like all supportive. They were all very well-intentioned people who just kind of were like, you're better now. And I was
some
like,
people just don't know any better.
Yeah. So basically by the end of that year, I was like, something needs to shift. And then I ended up going to beauty school, which was a weird,
Why beauty school?
So I wish I knew the exact reason.
I remember this phase, by the way. Your hair was always amazing.
I had every color hair possible, pretty much, which is definitely the beauty school way. Before I was kind of plummeting into despair, I was always very academic and always very much like, I want to go like pre-med or pre-dental. Like I want to major in biology and just be in school for 20 years.
Most people do.
Yeah, so I kind of had that in the back of my mind. And then the more and more that my mental health kind of like took over, the more and more I was like, that's definitely not happening. And I always really loved the idea of beauty school, and I always like did people's hair for dances or whatever, like that kind of thing. And so it was like, well, I'm not going to go major in biology, and I also really love this other thing, so like maybe I should just do that. So I just literally was like, we're gonna sign up, we're gonna just go for it, and if I can do it. So
you went for it.
Yeah, so it was a whole year, like 9 to 5, 40-hour a week beauty school, like 52 weeks straight, like no break, just like January to December. Just ran through it. And at first it was really great, kind of like how when I found the internet the first time, I was like, everything's wonderful, and then my problem still existed. My class was really small. We only had 9 people in like my incoming class, so we all got really close, and we all were very much like, we're gonna change the school, because it was kind of negative, kind of catty, kind of what people would probably expect in beauty school.
Yeah.
And we were all so positive and so like not drama, and we're like, we're gonna change it. Yeah, very extra in the positivity department. And yeah, I went through that whole entire program, didn't miss one day, had perfect attendance the whole time. So I had 2 free days off that I had like saved up or something. I don't know how I had them. And both times it was for therapy appointments, because at this point I wasn't going to therapy, and I was kind of in contact still with my old therapist every once in a while, and so he would like fit me in if I could come in, but it was like every couple months because I just couldn't make it work with the schedule. Right. I was there 9 to 5.
But you continued to need it at the same time.
Very much so.
Probably even more so with all the busy schedule.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I did really well. I had like got all the awards and was very overachievery.
Were you still like suicidal at the time?
It got back to that point. I feel like it's one of those things that my brain just has those thoughts, and like they certainly get better and worse, but I don't think they're disappearing in terms of like long term in my life. I don't think they're ever just gonna like not be there at some point, especially because it happened so young. Like the thoughts started happening so young. I think developmentally they're kind of like in there. They're a lot easier to combat, a lot easier to kind of notice and negate now as when I was younger, but yeah, they definitely still exist. So I kind of, throughout the whole experience, was doing okay, kind of ish, was very focused on being better for the school, for myself, for everything. Had this very intense go-get-em kind of surge of whatever. And yeah, that really does only last for so long if you keep ignoring your problems.
It sounds like a really positive time in your life overall.
I feel like it really was. I mean, I met a lot of really cool people and like had really good instructors and like felt supported for the most part. It's kind of like a job. Like once you're on the floor taking clients, like you're basically working.
Well, yeah, and the goal is also for it to be a job.
Yeah, so I graduated from that and went and got my license, did like the state licensing exam, worked in a salon for about 6 months, and basically was like, yeah, I don't think this is actually at all what I'm supposed to be doing.
Don't you love it when that happens?
Yeah.
You invest like months and years into something, and then you're like, wait a second.
Never mind. Yeah, so I left. I basically, while I was in beauty school, the very end of being in beauty school, I had like this mystical dream.
All right, I love it.
Yep, take it how you will. Had this mystical dream and was like, oh, I want to be a Christian. So anyway, that became a thing in a very casual way. I mean, I was working in a salon and was like, oh, church, this is a new thing I've never engaged in, and just normal, middle of the road kind of Christianity. Met some really cool people And while I was working in the salon, was more and more kind of like involved with that, like serving, like helping out with kids ministry, or like helping out with whatever, chairs, stacking things. Just feeling like, oh, community, this is so different and so nice. And then I was like, I want to go to Bible school.
Ooh, natural progression again.
Yeah, natural, very natural progression.
I feel like you just like to jump into things like all or nothing.
Yeah, I'm very much like, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it all the way, for sure. So by the end of that year, I went down to Bible college in Southern California.
Oh my God.
And basically saved definite money to go for a semester. It's not accredited. It's actually accredited now.
But at the time it wasn't.
But at the time it wasn't. So it very much was kind of like an extended Christian camp. Kind of. Like, it was like, come and like, you can have a 2-year degree here, but it doesn't really mean anything. Or, yeah, exactly. So I was like, well, I don't want to be there for 2 years. I just want to go for a second and like figure it out. And maybe I'll go longer. I don't know. So jumped in full force to that, went for a semester. The semester was over, and then summer was upon me. I didn't know what I was doing. And I went to this conference that a friend of mine from back home in Washington had posted about on Facebook. She was living down in California as well. They were throwing this conference. I went to this conference where they announced they were doing this summer training school thing. And it was all like Christian whatever, but it also was, there was like different tracks essentially for the school. So they had like a media track that was all focused around photography. And at this point I still was doing a lot of photography. And I basically was like, that's the thing. Like, I will do that this summer. Because I very much was like, what am I doing this summer? Right. I don't know. So I joined in with that. Again, like natural progressions. Had kind of the experiences again of having the short-lived utopia of like, this thing is so nice, but then being like, you still have never processed any of your issues.
Oh man.
And they came back basically quickly. I ended up living in that community for like 6 months, which turned out to like basically be a cult. Won't mention names.
I have a lot of experience with that as well. Growing up with Christians my whole life, like, I know mental illness can be a really sensitive topic. So did you tell them first of all? I
didn't tell them first off because it seemed irrelevant, which is laughable. Thinking about that, I'm like, that's funny that I thought it was irrelevant to this main part of my life, like didn't matter suddenly because I was like having fun. But yeah, it felt like I was doing better. Like, I really was. I had been in therapy for a good number of years, had developed a lot more tools, had more people around me, wasn't so isolated. So there were a lot of positive steps forward in terms of like recovery and maintaining kind of a level of stability. You know, like going into it, I was like, why would back in the day, like it seemed like it was this distant thing, even though it was still very recent.
I used to have depression.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, I used to have this problem, but not really, or like I kind of struggle. And then in Christianity, it's looked upon highly to have that kind of story of like, that used to be me, like now it's not, like very testimony type stuff. So it did kind of feel that way. I didn't feel pressured for people to, you know, to be like, that's the old you or whatever, but there was that language happening around me a lot, and so I kind of like was like, sure, okay, you know, like the group I was with was like hyper charismatic, but thankfully they didn't have the like every mental illness is a demon thinking, which is super helpful. They certainly had some things are demons thoughts, or a lot of things are demon or demonic or whatever, but they didn't put that on me, which I am very, at this point, I'm like, that was one nice thing. One nice thing about how that ended up.
So you were there for 6 months?
Yeah.
And struggling the whole time?
Pretty much struggling the whole time. Maybe like the first month was, you know, while I was kind of adjusting and moving in. And I mean, I lived in a house with 24 people.
Oh my God.
Interns. 24 people, unpaid interns who are paying to be there. Yeah. Yeah, I had 3 people in my room, so my room was the least populated, but it was a very small room with no closet, so that was fun with a bunch of girls. Like,
this keeps getting better and better.
Oh yeah, it was quite a time. Basically, probably about 3 months in, I was like, oh boy, like everything that I'm pretending doesn't affect me is like definitely still there, and it's definitely not even kind of there, it's like very there, and like the same feelings of like being trapped and having all this despair and having all this hopelessness and like thoughts of self-harm, which I hadn't done in quite a long time. Like all that stuff just was like louder and louder and louder and more appealing and more the tools I had learned weren't really cutting it. They weren't
Yeah.
like bringing it down really at all. And I had talked to a couple leaders, and they were really receptive and really supportive about me trying to find a therapist while I was there. And like it seemed like everything was going to be fine. And long story short, it wasn't. Shocker, yeah, exactly. As I progressively was struggling, I think they all kind of freaked out and didn't know what to do. I was kind of just shutting down a lot more and wasn't able to engage in the same way. And they kind of also deemed me to be like not safe, even though I certainly didn't feel like just 100%, like
Right.
obviously, but I didn't feel actively suicidal either. And I felt like if that was at any point going to come up, I was in a place that was supportive and loving, and I would have told someone. Like I wasn't going to go secret, run off and do something. It was like, I live with 24 people, I'm just going to tell one of them, you know, like it really did feel that way for maybe one of the first times that I had that like access. So I was staying at one of the other houses for a couple days. I think maybe the second day I was there, I had a panic attack in one of the girls' rooms, and we knew everything, like she knew what was going on, and she called all the like leaders.
Did she do it behind your back?
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yes. And then 4 middle-aged dudes, you know, just come into this room that I'm just coming back to myself, like just had a panic attack.
Oh my
you know,
God.
feel very vulnerable and afraid, and I'm just sitting up against a wall, like knees to my chest, just like breathing, getting back, calming down, whatever. And then they all just come in, and I keep looking at the door, and I'm thinking, I can't get out of here. And if I did, it would be bad. Like if I tried to like run out of that door, this is gonna be like a police chase. Like it's gonna be really bad. So there was a lot of things said that were very hurtful, a lot of things done that were very hurtful, and at the end of this short-ish conversation, one of them basically came up to me very condescendingly and said something like, would you agree to come to the hospital with us? At this point, I'm like, well, basically, this is very manipulative. If you're actually safe, you don't need to be in the hospital. Hello.
So you're just saying you are, but they don't believe you, but then...
But yeah, so I know, well, I have to comply. Again, this is kind of like a rerun of what's happened before, but in a really weird way. But they drive me to the hospital. Also note, they all come with me. So we're in a normal, like, 4-door car,
so make sure
sedan.
you don't, escape.
I don't know, literally. I'm surprised they didn't make me sit in the middle, because that would have been, like, next level, but they were pretty much there. But so there's just 4 of these dudes.
Not related to you in any way.
Not related to me. Just driving me to the hospital, and then me in the backseat with the other 2 of them, just like squished, thinking like, oh shit, like, oh god, like everything is bad. Like
So
everything
what
is
happened then?
bad. So I get to the hospital, and I think, well, you have to comply. So, they ask you, like, why are you here? And I'm filling out paperwork, and I'm like, suicidal thoughts? ? I'm like, I'm here because they made me come, but I feel fine. I don't feel 100%. I'm not gonna say that I was just floating on a cloud, because I was
feels
not.
100%?
Also that, yeah.
But... I
Yeah.
don't know. So many feelings.
I was not unsafe, basically. Like,
Yeah.
and again, I had told them, like, hey, like, if at any point I do feel unsafe, you will know. I will tell you. Like, there is not this aspect of me being isolated in my despair anymore. I'm with people. I'm with the community. Everyone loves me. Blah, blah, blah. Everything's positive. Why would I actually want to die? So went to the hospital. At this point, of course, too, I'm like, I've been in this rodeo before. It was probably like 10 o'clock at night, and I'm like, well, there's not going to be a psych triage because it's the night, and they don't need to be there because it's not like someone's heart is bleeding or something medical. In that regard, it's not emergent. You can be on a watch overnight when, another psych will come over in the morning. So that's what happened. So I was on watch basically just all night. They follow you to the bathroom, stand in the toilet with you, while you're peeing, and you're just like, hey. And my room was right by the nurse's station, and I had glass doors and, all the things to, like, make sure they could see me.
Oh, my God.
And I stayed up all night because I was like, I am so scared to go to sleep because I was afraid they were going to tell them something. Like, I feel like I had to, like, look out for everything. Like, the people who had come with me. I was like, they're going to lie or they're going to say something that's going to, like, imprison me. Like, it was just so gnarly.
So wait, so this was only a month after you started this?
No. So this was 5. It was like at the end of
at
5.
the end.
Yeah, this is the very end.
How can you go after this and living with these people?
Yeah, this was the very end. Yeah, this was like okay, bye.
That's even more fucked up though that you were there and you like living with them and being friends with them and then something like this could happen.
yeah, I mean, like, they, like, knew me, quote unquote,
Yeah.
you know? And there was a lot of, I mean, culty kind of brainwash type of stuff of just saying a lot of the same things over and over, and a lot of the, like, we're your family, we fight for you, we're your family, we fight for you, we're your family. Just a lot of that kind of, like, you're not alone, you are family, we are here, like, constantly being berated with it. So much huddle, chants, family, you know, like, put your hands in, like, just so much of it, to the point where you just start feeling crazy because you're being gaslit.
They're gonna throw you in the hospital.
Yeah, and you're like,
your will, basically.
Like, great, wonderful.
So you were there for just one night?
Just overnight, yeah. Wait for the psych. You wait for the psych triage. Mr. Nice Man in the sweater who comes by, says, "Hey, how's it going?" And I'm like, honestly, it's fine. I'm not doing great, but I'm not suicidal. I'm not unsafe. I'm in this community, which also, gosh, how to try to explain that to a hospital? Like, I live with 24 people.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, are you in a goal? And I'm like, well, yeah. But they actually didn't ask me that. But if they did, I probably would have been like, no, of course not. Like, I'm just living life. You know, just told them all the things, which were true. Like, I'm not unsafe, having a hard time, trying to find therapists down here. You know, I think they were scared. The people who brought me basically were scared and didn't know what to do. And so that's kind of what's happening. And it's just like, great, well, you know, here's your discharge. And like, see you later.
Bye, good luck.
So, you know, got like a $3,000 bill for that nice hot, like,
oh my God,
hospital night.
That's the most cringy part of all.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Basically, me leaving this community ended with the day after I got out of the hospital, all the leaders, like, met with me and basically just kind of continued down the line of, like, we don't trust you still. And we're kind of alluding to, like, me not being welcome to, like, stay.
You think?
Yeah. And so then we were about to, like, leave our conversation, and I stand up and I look at one of the guys who kind of the whole time just, like, wouldn't say it out loud that he was like, you can't stay here. And so I just looked at him and I was like, so let me get this straight. I'm not welcome to stay. And he said, yes. And I said, great. So I walked home. I started packing up my stuff. They made me give me numbers to my mom and my dad. So I'm like, oh shit, they're about to, like, ruin my entire life. So I'm calling my mom and dad frantically and being like, don't believe them. I don't know what they're going to tell you about me or the situation. Let me tell you what actually happened. And they're going to give you a call. So, like, again, they could be nice. I don't know what they're going to say. So I'm just, like, so scared. I'm legitimately
was valid. I'm glad you called them.
Terrified. I call my old therapist. I'm like, you haven't heard from me in 6 months. Hey, this is a weird conversation I'm about to have with you. And, like, left him this voicemail that was like, I'm, like, packing up all my stuff and I'm thinking, like, I was already about to leave for, like, kind of Christmas time anyway. And I'm thinking, like, I don't want to leave. I'm very much in it still, very much in the, like, but this is my family, and, like, I did something wrong.
You're brainwashed.
Yeah, very brainwashed. And thought, I'll just leave and come back, and they'll, like, take me back, and they'll forgive me because I did something wrong. Like, I thought that for a long time. After I left, I thought that for a very long time. I was so upset that I had to leave, and also was incredibly stressed out. And again, I was trying to call, like, everyone that I know to try to get, like, a good rapport built up who I was.
This is exhausting.
It was so awful. And I was outside my house because, like, they're gonna hear me. Like, I was, like, out in the street. And the next day we were at someone's house doing this dinner, and one of the main leaders, I went up to him and was just like, hey, like, I just want to tell you, like, I really don't want to leave. I know that so-and-so said that, like, I need to get out, but, like, I really just, like, I don't feel like I need to leave right now. Like, one of the main points was they feel like they couldn't watch me. So they're like, we can't keep track of you. So he told me, we never told you that. Ugh!
Oh my God.
Gag me. The gaslighting. That was, I think, the most overt to my face. Like, it's less than 24 hours ago you told me I wasn't welcome, and now you're telling me we never told you that. And I'm like, SOS. Yeah. So at that point I was like, well, I have a flight at the end of the week. So I left for about 2 or 3 months, was just like, I did something wrong. I didn't tell them up front about these problems. Like,
it's all your fault.
It's all my fault. It's going to be fine. They're going to forgive me. Everything's going to be great. And then my mom got diagnosed with terminal cancer.
Shit.
And the feeling of her dying very imminently was like a very big wake-up call.
So that's another thing I wanted to talk about today, because I know it's been like a huge event in your life, and you've been very open about dealing with it. on social media.
Yeah.
So that happened right after all this other shit was going down. It's like you can't get a break.
No, very much not at all. So I had moved up there when I left this community because I really had nowhere to go. Plus, I mean, she has extra room in her house, whatever. So I kind of was like, suitcase living up there, and then moved into a room that my sister and her boyfriend had, and was like, I'm just gonna live with them. Still in Northern California, about an hour from where my mom was living. It was very temporary, like me moving in with them. Like, well, whenever you want to move out, you can move out. We'll find another roommate. It was like really relaxed, and they were just really gracious about my whole situation and how like chaotic it was. And then she got diagnosed, and then of course everything changed very quickly.
I can imagine.
And I mean, I had many wake up calls over the next like a few months of her deteriorating, but that was the first like, oh, like that community did something very wrong. That was not me. And then it was like just going back and forth, like almost on the daily of just being like, no, it was my fault. No, it's their fault. No, it's my fault. No, it's their fault. And of course, not that simple, but
sucks to have to go through those mental gymnastics.
Yeah. And just feeling very confused. All the gaslighting was very intense, and so just feeling like I couldn't trust my perceptions, feeling like I couldn't trust what I remembered, feeling I couldn't trust what they had said or not said. And I had wrote so much of it down, like just for the sake of having like a record. I think because I was so scared when I was leaving that everything was going to be used against me and they were going to like ambush me or something. Like it was very scary. So I was trying to keep like a ledger of everything.
Which is a good idea.
Yeah, in that situation. I mean, if you're escaping a cult, keep
a
ledger.
Cult 101.
Keep a ledger. I don't even know what else, but keep a ledger. So the like imminent grief. I mean, when you know someone's dying, you're grieving the whole time. Which I don't know what's really better, like having someone die in a car accident or watching someone die 9 months. It's both terrible. There's no like ideal to that, but it's very weird grieving someone who's alive still, but knowing like they're not going to survive. Like there was no chance, like at all. I mean,
that sucks like on so many levels, but I would imagine it would be harder to like live in the moment with them, and they must obviously feel the effects of that too.
Yeah,
like it must be hard for them. Like
and my mom was very like everyone else first, and very much like just all of that all the time. So trying to get a gauge on what she actually needed or not needed was like impossible because she wouldn't even really tell you. And so a lot of her friends, I think were maybe she has had a lot of really close friends from high school. They all had stayed together for so many years, but a lot of them I think like pushed her way too hard, like throughout her sickness, like doing stuff or going out or whatever, and she very much just put everyone first, and everyone like they would like to be with me, and my sister made a really good point about this recently about like most of her friends pretty much were like very very in denial and very very like actively trying to enforce their denial.
Well, yeah,
so
they've been with her since high school. I can't even imagine watching someone grow up and then watching someone die, and like I just can't imagine at all.
That's a lot of years to like be close to people,
and I can also empathize with your mom, like wanting to do everything for everyone. Yeah, because you don't have a lot of time left. Yeah, so you want to do everything. But you physically can't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She definitely. I mean, of course, at first, she could, but then it got to the point where it was like, oh yeah, like she definitely can't. And the ramifications of her pushing herself too hard, just like being so sick and in so much pain, for the next 2 days, things like that, where it's like we need to like all just like know that this is happening and we need to not be pushing it. But yeah, a lot of her friends were kind of pushing it, definitely more than they should have been. So I was, in Northern California. I got an opportunity to move back down to Southern California. And this is my actual thought process of this was I can go back to Southern California. I'll be close to this community that I was a part of. And they will care about me now because my mom's dying. Man. Again, brainwash. And I was like, they'll care about me because I'll be close to them. So I waited a little bit and like talked to my mom about it. At this point, she was still like up and about, but had just been admitted. She had like some like blood clotting issues like related to chemo. So she was in the hospital for just like a week or so, and then was out. But she was like very conscious, wasn't like on all the medications and stuff that she was on at the end that kind of just knocked her out. And we like had a conversation about it, and I was like, I don't want to leave, but also I think I need to leave.
Oh my God. So, I know you talked about your relationship when you were a kid, how you couldn't really talk to her about this kind of stuff. So, as an adult, did that change? And especially like in light of her diagnosis?
Yeah, I think it got a little better. I did live with her just like here and there, kind of little bits like transitioning before I went to Bible school. I lived with her for a couple of weeks. At this point, also, like, she was always like very Christian, and so since I was Christianish, at that point was much more Christian. I think she also felt like now we have this thing in common, and so her not like her opinion of me, but how she interacted with me was definitely different. And I think she started listening a lot more to what I was trying to articulate if I was trying to explain to her where I didn't feel heard or how I felt hurt. It wasn't the kind of same responses that I got when I was younger. So she
Like
was
being
really
lovingly dismissed.
yeah. So she was really trying. It was very not familiar to her to like kind of meet people in those places and to not do the loving dismissal, but to do the like I'm in it with you and I like am believing what you're saying and I'm not trying to like talk you out of it or give you some kind of nice way to think about it. It's just bad and like that's fine.
So what was her reaction when you said you wanted to go back to Southern California?
I mean, at this point, because again, being so in it and being so like brainwashy, her only opinion of that whole experience was that it was super positive. Because I told her,
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, so I told her about the whole experience, like in general, but I also at that point had such an opinion of it being my fault and just being like, I didn't tell them up front, you know, blah, 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 all the excuses. So it wasn't like how I look at it now where I go, oh, I was like gaslit and abused for 6 months straight and like couldn't actually handle it anymore and left, you know, like, and
so she thought it was a positive thing that you were going back.
Yes. So to her, it was like, that's amazing, you know, it's like, what a beautiful gift. You have this community. This is all I've ever wanted for you. You're in this Christian community, you know, like very much, you know, like that. And so she like was like, yeah, go, you know, do what you need to do, come back when you want to come back, you know, like at this point we were a few
oh my God.
So I didn't move back to the community because the house that I had found with a friend that actually was living up here where I grew up, she also was planning on moving down for another thing that was nearby for a job basically. So yeah, I moved down and I didn't really do anything. I was incredibly depressed, waiting for my mom to die, understandably. And then there's definitely an underlayer of kind of coming to terms with this whole community and what they did, but then also going like, no, I can't lose that. Even if it's just like the idea of it, like I can't lose something else right now. So that was like a fight I had in my head a lot, was like, would I rather have no community or a community that has, at this point I wasn't calling it abuse or really trauma at all, but basically would I rather have no community or a community that abuses me? And I said I'll rather have a community that abuses me because I was so like, I can't lose something else. Like there's no way. Like I can't deal with it.
This happens to a lot of people who are in abusive relationships.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize this is the better choice. Not the better choice, but it's like it seems healthy at the time.
Yeah. So I lived down there for only like a total of about 6 months. Okay. I lived there, was still in contact with my great aunt. She was one of the only people who kind of kept in contact with me. And I was kind of always waiting to go back up there and like see her basically die. But didn't really know when and how and all the things. And my sister had moved in with her and was basically taking care of her. My grandma was as well. So when she went on hospice, she was like at home. She had gotten remarried the year before. So I also had like my stepdad. So they had this house that they were living in. And yeah, my sister and my grandma basically were taking care of her.
So they had a community there.
Of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah, of sorts for sure. Maybe more, maybe in my sister's opinion, probably more people around that she would have liked, because again, a lot of her friends that were very well intentioned, but you know, were grieving, and it comes out in kind of nasty ways a lot of times. And yeah, I waited and was down in Southern California and honestly did like nothing. I don't even remember those few months. I was like, what was I doing? I don't even remember like watching Netflix, you know?
Oh my God.
Because in my mind, I'm like, I probably was just watching Netflix. Like I was sad and like watching Netflix. I'm also, like, was I? I don't know.
You said you were grieving before she died. Like, do you feel like you did a lot of your grieving there?
Some part of it. I mean, grief is the most confusing thing. I mean, I try to explain it and talk about it a lot, like you kind of mentioned with social media and stuff, but it's so weird. And it's so weird knowing someone's dying. It's so weird after they die, but you've kind of been in it the whole time.
Yeah.
I just recently talked to my sister about this as well, about how we both, I think, upon her diagnosis, were like, she's dead. Like, we both kind of had the initial, like, that's it. Like, we kind of started that, like, right away. Whereas a lot of her friends, like, they were not that way. A lot of people around us, they were not that way. It was, like, months later. Or, like, when she died, that they actually, like, really started grieving.
How long after the diagnosis did she die?
I think about 8 months.
Oh my god, that's no time at all.
Yeah, no, it's pretty quick. And they gave her around, I think, like, 8 to 12, you know, was kind of what they were expecting. So it was kind of just, like, right in there.
So you had to just start planning, like, right away.
Pretty much. Yeah.
It's a really rough situation to be in, too, as a child.
Essentially.
Yeah. Someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And yeah, not knowing, I mean, yeah, what a weird thing to navigate and have no context. How did people do this? How is the right way? Which me leaving, I mean, I still have guilt about that, but, I mean, fluctuates. But
I mean, so obviously now you are able to describe that experience as abuse. Do you feel like leaving the second time was necessary for you to come to that point?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it was necessary.
Yeah. The final straw with them was, I was basically waiting for my mom to die. At this point, everyone was like, it's very imminent. And I had texted in the group message. I still had, like, the group me for that whole community. Like, I still was a part of it because they never, like, took me out of it. They did
much.
Soon. I know. Luckily, I have no more group me's. Thank you.
Good.
We are all blessed now. No more group me. But I was still in the group me. And so I kind of, like, put a message in it and was like, hey, like, sorry to be a downer. Like, I know y'all know my mom is sick, but, like, she's about to die. Like, can you just, like, pray or, like, whatever, you know.
I think you're apologizing for that.
I know. I mean, classic, though. I felt like such a nuisance and such a terrible person all the time. So I put that in the group. And then I got a call from one of the guys. We had no idea, which also, what? But anyway.
Sounds like they did.
Oh, yes, they did. But we had no idea it was this bad. And I was just praying with my mom and blah, blah, blah. We want you to come over here and we can just, like, love on you for a few days.
No.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. No. Yes. I know. It's like a horror movie. I'm like, of course I will go back. So I
mean,
was
while
like,
she's over there dying.
Yeah.
And you're just, oh my god.
Yeah. So it's grimy. So I was like, well, how do I get there? Because I'm an hour away, don't have a car. I'm an hour in a car, you know? And I was like, how do I get there? I can't spend $100 on a Lyft just to get over there. But I was considering it. So eventually when my roommates, who also didn't have a car, we borrowed our housemate's car. We drove down over, you know. I basically wasn't acknowledged. So yeah, he like legitimately was like, can we get you to come here? Like, was so adamant. Like, come here. We just want to, like, love on you and pray for you and, like, family time, you know? Like,
that language is just making me cringe.
Yeah, no, it's real.
So familiar.
It's nasty. Yeah, so, yeah, I found a way, got over there. It was basically ignored. And so I was like, well, it's fine because tomorrow's Monday, and Monday is when we have our meeting. I wasn't acknowledged. It's like I wasn't even there. And I had been in, you know, months and months and months of Monday morning meetings where people would come through the community who were used to be a part of it or affiliated, and it was always like, so-and-so's here, you know.
Oh my god.
Wasn't acknowledged. At the very end, when everyone was, like, packing up, one of the guys who used to be on the media team with me was like, Ellen Madison's here, and, like, tried to, like, rally the, you know. No. And I was like, thanks. Oh gosh, this is uncomfortable. So I just I went down there. We were really close to the beach, so I went down to the beach and just like hung out basically, and was waiting for everyone to love on me.
Right, as promised.
Right. And so that night, like Monday nights were our like worship night. It's basically like a house church for the whole community. So I was like, well then it'll be there, you know. So I kept just playing that. It'll be then. Went to that. Still wasn't really acknowledged. It was really awkward and people were really weird about everything. And I ended up staying for, I want to say 3 nights.
Oh my god.
Fully convinced at some point someone was going to notice or say something. Happened. And at one point I was eating some food in one of the kitchens, and one of the girls was like asking me about what I was doing, like why I was there. Not in a bad way, but just, you know, like, what are you up to, you know? And I was like, well, you know, so-and-so said, like, this was gonna happen, and, like, I just, like, I don't know. And she's like, do you want me to say something to him? And I was like, I think it's fine. Like, and I just like packed up my stuff and I just left. Like,
so
I
sad.
forgot how I even got home, but that was it. I was like, yep, this is the end of the thing, of being like months and months and months of people promising me things. The amount of things that I like texts that I got after I put that in the group message, people messaging me, people saying, I'm coming to come see you tomorrow, blah, like.
It's so easy to spew words out there, though. Like,
yeah. And I had not one person fall through with anything
God.
in a community of about like 50 people, probably 20 of which were very adamant about like doing certain things, helping with certain things, coming to see me, doing whatever. Not one person one time followed through with any of it.
At least you knew.
At that point, I was like, okay, cool. This is awful. Like, this is an awful place where people are awful. On the most, benign level, you all just have terrible follow through and are not kind to each other. And on the least benign level, you're gaslighting and abusing people.
Yeah.
And that both sides of that is bad. So goodbye.
Oh my God. Yeah. So then you went back to Northern California?
Yeah. So I got back to my house and was like, well, that was terrible. And maybe like a week later, I was talking to my great aunt and she was like, yeah, I think, the timing's really up in the air, but I think if you want to see your mom before she dies, you need to come. So I flew out like 2 days later and then she died a week later. So I was there. Wow. I was like in the house. She died overnight, but yeah, I was there when that happened, and then all sorts of things happened after that. But yeah,
that's
been 3 years, and it's been like 3 years of processing through all of the weird spiritual trauma stuff, and then lots of trauma related to like her death, things related to like around that time, and then a copious amount of childhood things that I've also put on hold like my entire life. There's a lot of things.
Like the faith stuff, I'm so sorry you went through that, and to anyone else who's like experienced that kind of abuse, it just sucks. And I know like you have salvaged some of that like spirituality now, which I think is great.
Yeah. When I was living down in Southern California, awaiting my mom's death, essentially, I found this podcast, which I think I maybe found right around that time, called The Liturgists, and it like they have been my people for like 3 years now.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's just a lot of deconstructed any person. Like, I mean, if you have some religious framework, you're probably gonna like understand more of what they're talking about, but just really deconstructed mystic, atheist, agnostic, just all sides of everything is kind of included, but they all were Christians or are Christians to some extent at this point. And yeah, they're like my people. So I found like finding that group of internet people again. It kind of came back to my internet love.
What's it called? The Liturgists?
The Liturgists.
Awesome. That's something to check out if you're interested in spirituality, religion, any of that stuff.
They have an episode on spiritual trauma as well, which like they have warnings for it being triggering, but it's really intense. But it is like a very also a relief when you hear it, because there is so much like just feeling so crazy with spiritual trauma. There's a lot of gaslighting usually, so hearing other people talk about it is like, oh, okay,
I'm not alone.
It is real. Oh my gosh, like that's horrible. I hate that it's real, but also, oh my gosh, it's real.
So your mom died 3 years ago, and you've been through a lot of shit since then.
Yeah.
And obviously, mental health is a journey. I don't think anyone's ever going to be fully recovered or like healthy. But I've personally just loved watching your journey like over the years, and like the stuff you post is so inspiring and honest and like vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think it's super important to be able to talk about like your low points as well as your victories. One thing I love that you do is like you have these hashtags for like, I don't even know how to explain it. So every year you have like a different hashtag, like a theme for the whole year, like a goal. Would you call it a goal or like
a theme?
So
I don't know.
I wanted to talk about this because this episode will come out on New Year's, which is so beautiful. Like, I don't know. I love that you approach life with like new beginnings. Can you talk a little bit about those hashtags and like what they mean to you?
Yeah, I don't exactly know what initially started it. I mean, I've done it for I think the last 4 or 5 years, like pretty much since I joined Instagram. I don't know if maybe it was like an artifact from Tumblr of like tagging things and then being able to like keep track. Because like with Tumblr, you could have, on your own blog, have certain tags, and then you could go to your blog and find those tags and like, have some sort of organization to it, which was kind of fun. So I don't know if it was maybe an artifact of that subconsciously of like, I want to have a thing that's like all one thing so that I can click on it at the end of the year or, you know, in retrospect and be like, oh, here's my whole year. I'm not sure if that's what the goal was originally.
Like a log or like in Ledger.
Yeah, and I don't use hashtags, you know, in the kind of way that a lot of people use hashtags, like in the businessy way where you're trying to get followers and you have the block of hashtags, you know, after
I'm trying, my little sister is like with me right now helping me like with the podcast, and like the last post I posted, she made me post all these hashtags and I was like, oh my god, are you sure people do this? She was like, yes.
Oh, they definitely
She was just
do.
typing, like finding all the hashtags. I was like, oh my god, this is so weird.
It's very, very real. It's like definitely a thing. So I usually don't hashtag anything else except for my hashtag for the year, and it's always year of blank blank. It's always been an alliteration again.
So what was the first one, if you can remember?
Gosh.
Or the most recent one?
Well, this year is Surpassing Survival. Last year was Lovely Loss. I don't remember what the years before that were. I'd have to go back in history.
So year of, you said Passing Survival?
Surpassing Survival.
Surpassing Survival. What does that mean
this year
to you?
Coming out of all of that community, all of the grief, all of the kind of compounding stuff. It has been like 3 years, but in another sense, it was like yesterday.
Of course.
Like with most things, I think there's just so much that you're uncovering and trying to sort through and figure out. And there's often just a complete inability to even go there. So there was a large inability for me to even begin to go there for quite a long time. I mean, like after my mom died, I think for about a year, I was just like real checked out. Like I was working and doing whatever, but was not really a human being in the sense of doing the work, quote unquote, you know, like doing the therapy or whatever. I was just like, I have nothing to offer anyone right now.
I mean, if anyone's entitled to that, it would be you, you know, like
at that point, yeah, I needed to kind of zone out. So yeah, Surpassing Survival, all of my like little alliteration things have kind of just come at the end of the year, just randomly. We'll be walking around and we'll just kind of be like, oh, that's what it is, and then that's what it is.
Well, you said the last one was the year of Lovely Loss.
Mm-hmm. So that was last year.
That's an interesting
term. And that was all about reformulating what grief was to me, like what I thought about losing things and what I thought about, I think more importantly, reframing it under the kind of idea that it's not always just bad. Like it's not like losing things is always bad. Of course losing things can be very bad, but I think I lumped everything into just being like, letting go of anything is terrible. So I became really rigid, I think, that year, kind of processing through grief and things, thinking like I've noticed myself holding on to things so much more and harboring things so much more, and very much the whole year was more intentional about saying like, that's not gonna work out. Like I see what you're doing, me, like I see why you're holding on to all the things, like physical or relationships, like with friends or like just anything, like I see how scared you are, but like let's think about this in a different way. Like what is good about things that go away? Like what things...
Seeing loss is a good thing.
I mean, I didn't know that going into it. It was lovely loss, okay, whatever. And then by the end of the year, reflecting on it and going, oh, okay.
That's really cool. Like at the beginning of the year, you kind of give it a name. You don't know what. Yeah. But then like as you're reflecting on it throughout the year, you kind of assign it meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of been the way to do it for me, at least. Like, so this new year, I have some ideas.
I was going to ask you. That was going to be my next question.
I was going to say, like, let me see. I have what I'll probably end up making it. Let's see. Where is it? It's something about connected capacity is kind of the possible one.
Connected capacity.
Mm-hmm. Or something about maybe even clarity in there. But yeah, again, not exactly even sure what that looks like. And I've tried to even reflect on Surpassing Survival as it's, you know, almost the exact end of the year as we're speaking.
Yeah.
And I've got to reflect a little bit on like what that has looked like. And this year has come with a lot of transitions with like therapists, with diagnostic stuff, with getting a lot more answers that I've really never had in 10 years of having people try to help me out and me trying to help myself out. So this year has been very interesting in that regard of it's been very paralyzing in a lot of senses, but has also been coming to understand and experience something that's just beyond like that numb, checked out, like I'm just surviving, I'm just
Right.
getting
So now
through.
you're coming out of survival and into like clarity, like focusing on like bringing all that stuff together and realizing like, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I think you probably maybe have seen on social media, I have talked a little bit about that recently, about like, if you don't have answers, like, I feel that. Like,
it's okay.
Like, it so sucks to not have answers, and it is disappointing and can feel really awful to just be like, I don't know what I'm doing, and like, nothing is helping. And it's like, I can say in at least a small way, for a small part of my experience, like, there are answers to something somewhere, and I don't know what that looks like for people or when that comes for people, but they exist.
Don't give up trying to find them.
Yeah, definitely. If something doesn't like fit right with you, if something doesn't sit right with you with someone you're getting help from, or even just in your own like reflection, if something's like grinding up against you and you're like, like maybe examine that, like maybe there's something there, like I think it's worth exploring, even though it's difficult.
Thank you for talking about all this stuff. Like,
Yay.
I just love that I get to finally meet you and talk about this stuff and like have you on my podcast. It's just like so surreal to me.
Yeah.
I got an email from a listener about loss. She says, a week ago, I lost my grandfather to cancer/pneumonia. I have really weird feelings about this because honestly, I'm not sad at all and I feel like I should be. My grandpa was a great man, and I'm sure he was super loving to my sister and I at some point, but also he was never very supportive of me. One of my most prominent memories of him isn't exactly positive. I got my bachelor's in fine art, and right before I went to study abroad, I was telling him and my grandma how excited I was to travel to Italy and see the art I'd studied in my art history courses. And his response was really negative. He basically told me that it was pointless for me to go to Italy and see art, and it would be more worthwhile to go see war memorials and things of historical significance. And she says, what? In the same breath, he basically told me that I wouldn't go anywhere with my degree. I should go back for 6 more years to get a real degree instead. I feel super conflicted because this wasn't the only time he showed little to no support for me and my passions, and that mixed with the fact that his quality of life had been so poor for so long has made it really hard for me to feel any grief. I'm trying to figure out if this is okay or if I should talk to someone about it. I know you were kind of... Your mom is obviously a really positive person in your life, like especially in the end. And but I know you talked about how when she got her diagnosis, you kind of just in your head, like you were grieving right then. I think it demonstrates that grief can mean so many different things to so many people, like you were saying.
Yeah.
I mean, me personally, I feel like there's no right or wrong way to feel grief. You just feel it. Like you have no say in it.
Yeah, I think that would be the main thing. I think, like, the end, I mean, they said something about, like, should I talk to someone or is it okay, essentially? And I'm like, yes, both. Like, if you want to talk to someone about it, I think that's great. Everything that comes up when you're grieving, it should be given space. And that's really hard. I mean, even to give yourself that space is really hard. To find that in other people is much more hard, especially depending on where your family's at. There was a lot of stuff after my mom died. My sister and I still are like, that could have gone differently. We really weren't given space to grieve at all or think about really anything. We kind of had to like clear out our house like instantly and move my sister out like the next day. Like it was,
I can't even imagine,
really messy. So if you can give yourself space to feel like release, to feel what you do, I think there is a lot of relief that comes when people die, depending on the scenario. I mean, if people are sick or if they're in pain.
Yeah, you said his quality of life was really low, so...
Yeah, there's that degree of just being like, oh, like, they're suffering. Like, they're not suffering now. Like, that's a relief, you know? And I don't think that should be, you know, like...
Don't feel guilty about feeling that relief.
Yeah, you know?
If that's the case.
And even, I mean, there's so many things that I think that probably people wouldn't want to, like, own up to because we'd be like, oh, that's, like, bad. But it's like, no, like, if you have those feelings of, like, I'm relieved or I can go back to my life. Like, there's so many things that come up that you're like, oh, that's awful. Like, I should just be sad that they're dead. But it's like, there's a lot of things that death, like how much impact that has, or like someone dying, how much impact that has, and how much when they are dead, when they have passed, that there are positive things that come out of that are, I think, hard to like sit with and feel like you can even feel. But I think, yeah, especially if you have, you know, maybe not as positive of experiences with them, it's like you can hold all of it at once. Like it's just never going to be one thing, and it's never going to be like it's just all weeping all the time.
Yeah, that's not how it is. Like, and thanks for sharing, because it's important to talk about these feelings that you might not feel are valid, but a lot of people can probably relate.
Yeah, definitely.
So thanks for that. I hope you guys have a good new year. Woo. It's my favorite time of year. I love it so much. I'm a sucker for like the symbolism and everything. I mentioned this in the last episode. Yeah, love you guys. And 2019 is going to be infinitely better than 2018.
Yes.
It better be, because this year sucked. But yeah, have a great rest of your week, and bye.